For most people, the morning was a chance to start fresh, to meet friends, greet neighbors, or simply share a smile. But for Martin, mornings were a quiet reminder of how utterly alone he was. His small apartment, tucked away on the third floor of a crumbling brick building, felt less like a home and more like a cage. The walls were lined with books he never finished, half-dusted shelves, and empty coffee mugs that collected forgotten mornings. Martin's life was a series of solitary routines. Each day he woke at exactly 6:30, brewed a cup of black coffee, and sat by the cracked kitchen window to watch the world go by. People in the street hurried past, voices and laughter blending into a distant hum he barely noticed anymore. He never waved or smiled, not because he disliked people, quite the opposite. He simply didn't know how to reach out anymore. Decades ago, Martin had been different. He used to work as a photographer, capturing vibrant moments of life and connection. But those days felt like someone else's memories, distant, blurred. Time had chipped away at his friendships, and after one by one they slipped away. He stopped trying to hold on. Now, his camera gathered dust in a drawer, a relic of a life that had once been full of light. His only regular contact was the cashier at the corner grocery store, a young woman with a warm smile, who occasionally tried to strike up small talk. But Martin's answers were always brief, curt, even more out of habit than malice. Conversations required energy he no longer had, so, after paying for his bread and milk, he'd retreat back to the shelter of his solitude. The apartment was stark, furnished with the bare essentials, a worn armchair, a small wooden table, and a bed pushed against one wall. The pale morning light crept through thin curtains, casting long shadows on the faded wallpaper. On the walls hung a few black and white photographs, some his own work, now faded with age, frozen moments of laughter, of strangers embracing life in ways Martin no longer could. Loneliness wasn't just about being alone, it was the weight of invisible walls, the silence that swallowed voices, and the cold distance that no one else seemed to notice. Martin felt like he was watching life through a thick glass pane, separate and untouchable. The world went on without him, a vibrant painting he could admire but never step into. His days were marked by mundane chores and aimless wandering through old memories. He sometimes walked in the nearby park, not to enjoy the fresh air or sunshine, but to feel less invisible amid strangers. Watching children play and couples talk in soft whispers reminded him of what he'd lost, and what he feared he might never have again. Despite his isolation, Martin wasn't without hope. Not quite. Somewhere deep inside, buried beneath years of loneliness, there was a small flicker, a quiet longing for change. But that hope was fragile, easily smothered by the weight of routine and fear. On this particular morning, Martin noticed something unusual, a small, hard lump on the right side of his back. He hadn't felt it before, and the strange sensation startled him. Using the bathroom mirror, he twisted awkwardly to examine the spot, but all he saw was a faint bulge beneath the skin. He pressed it gently, and it didn't hurt, but the oddness unsettled him. He dismissed it quickly. After all, there was no one to share this discovery with, no one to urge him to seek help. The lump was just another oddity in a life where little changed. Besides, Martin was used to ignoring the small aches and quirks of aging. Yet, the lump stayed in his mind throughout the day, a quiet pulse of discomfort he couldn't shake. It was as if the lump was a physical manifestation of his isolation, a silent reminder that something was growing inside, unnoticed, untouched. That evening, as he sat alone in his dim living room, the city lights flickering beyond the window, Martin felt the familiar weight of solitude settle around him. His thoughts drifted to the past, to friends who had moved away, to opportunities missed, and to the moments when he might have reached out but didn't. The lump in his back was still there, unchanged but persistent, and in the deep quiet of the night, Martin wondered if it meant something he couldn't yet understand. For now, though he was just a lonely man, wrapped in the silence of his own life, waiting for something, anything, to break the stillness. The next morning, Martin woke with a dull ache in his back where the lump had appeared. It was no longer just a vague presence. Now it throbbed softly beneath his skin, a persistent reminder that something was happening to him. Despite the discomfort, Martin avoided looking at it. His fear wasn't of pain, but of change, of the unknown. At work, or rather, at the small freelance assignments he occasionally took, Martin found himself distracted. His mind kept drifting back to that lump, wondering what it could be. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe just a harmless cyst, or a muscle knot from sleeping wrong. But the uncertainty gnawed at him. Days passed, and the lump grew steadily larger. It was now slightly raised, more visible when he looked in the mirror, though still tucked beneath his shirt. Martin began to notice subtle changes. The skin over it was faintly red, and when he touched the area there was a strange warmth he couldn't explain. Despite this, Martin's days continued much the same. His interactions remained limited, his steps cautious and measured. Sometimes he thought about calling a doctor, but the idea of breaking his routine, stepping out of his comfort zone, felt overwhelming. He feared judgment, feared that the loneliness he worked so hard to maintain might suddenly feel unbearable if someone else knew about his weakness. Instead, he took to covering the lump with layers of clothing, wearing shirts that hid the bulge, as best as he could. But in the quiet moments, alone in his apartment, the lump called to him like an insistent whisper he couldn't ignore. One afternoon, Martin sat at his kitchen table, staring at a blank notebook. He used to write poetry, stories, or jot down photography ideas, but for years the pages had remained empty. Now, feeling restless, he tentatively reached for a pen and slowly wrote a single sentence. "There is something growing inside me." He paused, pen hovering over the paper, then wrote again, "I am scared." The lump pulsed in reply, a rhythmic throb beneath his skin that matched the beat of his own heart. It was as if the lump had a life of its own, separate from him, yet intimately connected. As evening fell, Martin's unease grew. The lump was no longer just a physical annoyance. It had become a symbol of his solitude, a secret he couldn't share with anyone. That night, lying face down on his bed, he tried to ignore it, but the pressure grew unbearable. Without fully understanding why, he reached behind and pressed firmly against the lump. There was a faint give, a small shift beneath the surface. Then, suddenly, a sharp sting shot through his back, making him gasp. Pulling his hand away, Martin examined the spot. The lump looked swollen and redder than before, and for the first time, he felt a trickle of warmth, not pain, but something almost alive. His breath hitched. This was no ordinary lump. Sleep came fitfully. In his dreams, the lump whispered, faint voices, flickers of light, strange shapes twisting beneath his skin. He awoke with a start, sweat on his brow and the sensation that the lump was watching him back. Martin's world, once static and predictable, was beginning to shift. The quiet loneliness that had defined him for so long now seemed fragile, like a thin layer of ice over something deep and unknown, and he wasn't sure whether to be afraid or strangely hopeful. Days turned into a week, and the lump on Martin's back grew more pronounced. It was no longer something he could easily conceal beneath his clothes. The skin stretched taut, shiny and slightly pink around the edges, and every now and then, a faint pulsing throb reminded him that it was very much alive. Martin's curiosity deepened, mingled with annoying anxiety. He found himself constantly reaching behind to touch it, feeling the strange warmth and subtle movement beneath his fingertips. It was as if the lump had a heartbeat of its own, faint but steady. Despite this, Martin stayed firmly in his solitude. He didn't call a doctor, nor did he tell a single soul about the strange growth. The thought of exposing this secret to the outside world terrified him. What if it was something terrible? What if it made him less human? Worse, what if it forced him to confront the loneliness he had carefully avoided for so long? Each morning, the lump seemed to throb more insistently, its presence impossible to ignore. Martin's sleep grew restless. He awoke often, drenched in cold sweat, haunted by vivid dreams where the lump whispered secrets he couldn't quite understand. One evening, after a long day of quiet unease, Martin sat in his armchair staring at the wall. His mind raced with questions. Was this some strange illness, a parasite, or something else entirely? He remembered how his grandfather used to say, "The body holds more than just flesh and bone. Sometimes it holds secrets waiting to be told." With trembling hands, he tried to examine the lump in the bathroom mirror. Twisting his torso awkwardly, he managed a partial view. The lump was roughly the size of a small egg, rounded and pulsing softly. Its surface shimmered faintly, almost translucent in the pale light. The sight unsettled him more than he expected. Was this a warning, a message, or an omen? Martin's thoughts drifted back to his life, how he had shut himself away after losing friends, after the small betrayals and disappointments piled up like dust in forgotten corners. The lump felt like a physical manifestation of all those years of silence and isolation, now demanding attention. That night, he lay on his bed with his hand resting lightly on the lump. The warmth seeped through his skin, comforting and alien. At the same time, his heart pounded with a strange mixture of fear and hope. Maybe this was the change he had been waiting for, a way out of the endless loneliness. But what kind of change? And at what cost? As the moonlight filtered through the curtains, Martin whispered softly to himself, What are you? What do you want from me? No answer came, only the steady, pulsing beat beneath his hand, like a tiny drum calling him forward into the unknown. That night, Martin tossed and turned in his bed, unable to shake the restless energy coursing through his body. The lump on his back throbbed relentlessly, pulsing like a heartbeat of its own, and a strange heat radiated from it, growing stronger by the hour. Around midnight, Martin woke with a start. A sharp, sudden pain stabbed through his back, unlike anything he'd ever felt. It was sharp and deep, as if something inside was trying to break free. He gasped, clutching the bedsheets, his breath coming in shallow, rapid bursts. Panicked, he struggled to sit up, his hand automatically reaching behind to touch the lump. To his horror, he felt the skin over it stretching tight, almost translucent now. The lump was bigger, swollen and tense, as if ready to burst. Martin's mind raced. Was this it? Was the moment he'd feared finally here? His instincts screamed at him to get help, but old habits died hard. Fear kept him rooted to the spot, alone in the quiet darkness of his room. Suddenly, there was a wet, warm sensation beneath his fingertips. His eyes widened as he realized the lump was no longer just a lump, it was breaking open. A small crack appeared in the skin, spreading rapidly, like a balloon about to pop. Martin's heart pounded wildly, but he didn't move. He felt a mix of terror and fascination as the skin gave way, and something strange began to emerge. It wasn't blood or pus as he had expected. Instead, a soft glow spilled from the wound, casting eerie light across the walls of the room. From the opening, something delicate and translucent began to push through like a tiny, fragile creature or a luminous seed. Martin blinked in disbelief. He wanted to scream, to run, but the glowing thing held him rooted in place, filled with a strange wonder he couldn't explain. Minutes felt like hours as the fragile form slowly took shape. Emerging from the ruptured lump, it shimmered and pulsed, a living light that seemed both alien and beautiful. The warmth it radiated was soothing, calming the pain that had gripped him moments before. Martin's loneliness, his years of silence and isolation, suddenly felt distant. Here was something new, something alive, something that had chosen him, breaking through his solitude like a whisper from another world. Tears pricked his eyes, but they were tears of awe, not fear. For the first time in years, Martin felt a spark of connection, a fragile thread linking him to something greater than himself. He whispered, barely audible, "What are you?" The glowing presence pulsed gently in reply, filling the room with a soft, humming light. Martin knew, in that moment, that his life was about to change forever. Martin sat frozen, his heart hammering in his chest as the soft glow from the ruptured lump bathed his small room in an otherworldly light. The creature or whatever it was had fully emerged now, hovering just above his skin, delicate and shimmering like a living fragment of starlight. It pulsed gently, its radiant tendrils writhing slowly as if breathing. He blinked, not trusting his eyes. The thing was no bigger than a fist, translucent with colors shifting softly between pale blue, green, and faint violet. It resembled neither anything Martin had seen in the natural world nor any of the countless photographs he'd taken throughout his life. It was utterly alien, yet somehow familiar, as though it had been waiting inside him all along. Martin reached out with trembling fingers, barely daring to touch. The creature responded instantly, emitting a soft, warm glow that radiated through his skin and sent a ripple of comfort and wonder through his body. The warmth wasn't just physical, it stirred something deep within him, an echo of hope long buried beneath years of loneliness. He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. What are you? The glowing being pulsed rhythmically, almost like it was trying to communicate, but no words came. Instead, Martin felt a strange resonance, as if the creature was reaching out not through sound but through emotion, memory, and something deeper, something he could only describe as a feeling of profound connection. In the past, Martin had taken photos to capture moments of life, fragments of human experience. But now, here was something alive inside him, embodying a story far beyond his understanding. He realized that for years, his life had been defined by absence of touch, of words, of shared moments, and now this presence was breaking that silence. Suddenly, a small tendril of light stretched toward his face, brushing gently against his cheek. Martin shivered, not from cold but from a sudden rush of emotion, a bittersweet mingling of loneliness and belonging. Tears slipped down his cheeks. He hadn't cried in years, not like this. The creature's glow softened, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat, and Martin felt an unfamiliar peace settle inside him. For a moment he let himself imagine what this could mean, a chance to reconnect, to change, to break free from the invisible walls he'd built around himself. The creature, sensing his openness, shifted shape. It elongated and stretched along the curve of his back, its tendrils weaving gently beneath his skin, as if integrating itself with his body without pain or resistance. Martin could feel a tingling sensation spread from the wound across his shoulders and spine, a sign that this presence was becoming part of him, though the experience was surreal. Martin's fear began to dissolve. The creature wasn't harming him, it was healing him in ways he couldn't yet understand. His stiff back began to relax, and the old ache that had been a constant companion softened, replaced by a quiet energy humming through his veins. Days passed differently after that night. Martin woke each morning with the creature's faint glow warming his back, a steady reassurance that he was not alone. The lump was gone, replaced by a thin, barely visible line where the wound had healed, but the presence remained a living secret between them. With this new life inside him, Martin noticed subtle changes in himself. His isolation felt less suffocating. He found the courage to speak to the cashier at the grocery store, exchanging a few more words than usual. He even ventured further into the park, no longer content to be just an observer, but willing, slowly, to step into the life he'd long avoided. The creature, a quiet companion, seemed to grow stronger with every day, pulsing softly whenever Martin felt doubt or loneliness creeping back. It was as if the presence fed on connection, both within him and from the world around him. One afternoon, while watching children play near a fountain, Martin felt the creature stir, sending a wave of warmth through his spine. He smiled a small, genuine smile, and for the first time in a long time, he felt hope. But even as the glow brightened and his heart lightened, Martin knew this was only the beginning. The creature held secrets he hadn't yet uncovered, mysteries about his own past and the strange bond they now shared. And somewhere, deep inside, a question lingered. What exactly had emerged from his back, and why had it chosen him? Martin didn't have the answers yet, but for the first time he was ready to seek them. In the days that followed the luminous being's emergence, Martin found himself caught between awe and confusion, hope and fear. The strange creature pulsing beneath his skin was no longer a secret he could deny, but its presence unsettled him more than he expected. Every morning, as sunlight crept through the curtains, Martin felt the faint glow warm his back, a constant reminder that his body was no longer entirely his own. He often reached behind, half expecting the lump to reappear or the creature to shift visibly beneath his skin. But instead, there was only a subtle thrum, a delicate pulse that seemed to echo his own heartbeat. At first, Martin tried to ignore it, as he had ignored the loneliness that had wrapped around him for years. He told himself the creature was just a strange anomaly, something to endure, not to embrace. Yet, denial proved impossible. The presence inside him was persistent, an ever-present part of his existence. One evening, Martin sat in his dimly lit living room, staring at the small, worn photograph on his wall, a black and white picture he had taken years ago of two children playing in the park. It was a snapshot of joy and connection, now so distant from his own life. The creature pulsed softly in response, almost as if it understood his unspoken sorrow. His chest tightened. The loneliness he had carried for so long felt like a chain. And yet, here was this strange, glowing companion, a key he neither fully grasped nor trusted. His struggle was internal but intense. At times, the creature's warmth soothed him, its pulsing light filling the empty spaces inside his heart. At others, it frightened him, an alien force that challenged his very identity. What if it was changing him into someone unrecognizable? What if it was dangerous? One night, overwhelmed by doubt, Martin pressed his palm firmly against his back, where the creature dwelled. He focused on the rhythm of its pulse, trying to synchronize his breathing with the gentle glow. "Who are you?" he whispered, voice cracking in the silence. No words came, but a wave of emotions washed over him: loneliness, longing, hope, and something else, a promise. The creature wasn't merely an invader or a parasite. It was something far more profound. Gradually, Martin began to see the presence not as a threat, but as a reflection of his own buried feelings, a part of himself he had long ignored. The glowing being was a manifestation of his loneliness, and his desire for connection, shaped into a living symbol. Acceptance wasn't easy. Each day brought moments of fear, vulnerability, and uncertainty. But slowly, Martin found the courage to open his heart, not just to the creature but to the possibility of change. He started small. One afternoon he left his apartment and walked to the local cafe. The bell chimed as he entered, and for a moment, his old instincts urged him to retreat. But he stayed, ordering a coffee and sitting by the window where he could watch people pass by. The creature pulsed warmly on his back, a quiet reassurance. Martin took a deep breath and smiled at the barista, who returned it with a surprised but kind expression. It was a small victory, but to Martin, it felt like a giant leap. Days later, he found himself reaching out to an old acquaintance, a former colleague who had once invited him to join a local photography group. The call was tentative, filled with awkward pauses, but it was real. For the first time in years, Martin was reconnecting with the world outside his solitude. The glowing presence seemed to grow stronger. With every step Martin took toward others, it pulsed brighter when he laughed softly at a shared joke and dimmed when doubt or fear crept back. It was as if the creature fed on connection, not just physical, but emotional and spiritual. Martin realized that the lump in his back, the mysterious light within, was more than a strange illness or an alien life form. It was a catalyst for transformation, a companion guiding him through the darkness of loneliness toward the light of belonging. One evening, as Martin rested on his worn armchair, the creature's glow filled the room with a gentle radiance. He closed his eyes and let the warmth wash over him, feeling a deep sense of peace for the first time in years. "I'm ready," he whispered, "ready to live again." And for the first time since the lump had appeared, Martin felt truly alive. Samuel sat motionless in the overgrown garden behind his cottage, the sun just beginning to sink behind the cliffs. His wings switched slightly as if testing the air. They were darker now than when they'd first emerged, as though absorbing the light around them. He ran a trembling hand along the edge of one, feeling the sinewy membranes stretch under his fingertips. The sensation was alien, yet entirely natural, like touching your own face in a mirror and seeing someone else. But the wings were only part of it. With their emergence came something stranger, deeper. Memories. They arrived, not all at once, but in waves like the tide slowly erasing footprints. On a beach at first, just images. A sky that wasn't blue but violet, swirling with stars during the day. Mountains of crystal, shattered and ancient. Vast wings blotting out twin suns. Then came sounds, not words, but a language of vibration that struck his chest like thunder. Voices, not human, calling his name, not Samuel, no, something older, something unpronounceable now. With his human tongue he saw himself, the other self, flying through a storm that cracked the sky in half, chased, hunted, wounded, and then the fall. That moment came with excruciating clarity, a rupture in the sky, burning cold, a tearing sensation as his wings, once mighty and proud, were ripped away. He plummeted through clouds, through atmospheres, across realities until Earth. He hit the sea. He remembered the pain of it, salt water rushing into lungs that didn't belong to this world, bones cracking, consciousness fading, a final instinct to survive, to adapt, to hide. He had rebuilt himself, somehow, piece by piece, fragmented into flesh, buried within a human shell. The man known as Samuel Greaves was not a lie. He was a cocoon, a chrysalis, a vessel. But the true being, the one with wings, had always been waiting beneath. Samuel staggered to his feet, gripping the rusted fence post beside him. His knees were weak, but his mind had never felt clearer. The feverish dreams, the maddening itch, the hunger and restlessness had all been part of the reawakening. He stumbled inside his cottage, knocking over a stack of books. His reflection caught in the cracked mirror above the sink startled him. His eyes were different now, with gold, and glowing faintly in the dim light. He opened his mouth to speak, to test the old name, the one echoing in his thoughts, but what came out was a low, resonant tone, vibrating the glass in the windows. He laughed, a strange, giddy sound, not out of joy but recognition. He had come back. Yet with the memories came questions. Why now? What had triggered the awakening? Time alone, a shift in the world, or something else? He recalled flashes, faces of others like him, wings of different colors, shapes, one with feathers of flame, another with crystalline wings that caught light like prisms. They had flown together once, in some great migration across galaxies. Perhaps they, too, had fallen, hidden, reborn in human shells like his. Were they waking up to a memory surfaced vivid and sharp, a warning, spoken by one of the old ones before the fall? If the wings ever return, so too will the ones who tore them from us. Samuel shivered. The implication sat heavy in his chest. He wasn't the only thing awakening. That garden cat stirred outside. They had become strange lately, hadn't they? One had grown silent and stared at him with eyes too intelligent. Another had a strange patch of bare skin on its back, like something was pushing from beneath. He hadn't noticed it before, maybe he hadn't wanted to. The world was not what it had seemed, not anymore, and neither was he. Samuel stepped outside again, the evening wind catching his wings. They flared slightly, lifting him onto the balls of his feet. He didn't need a mirror to know. He was changing still. The man he had been was fading. Somewhere far off, in the depths of his memory, a song began, the song of his kind, a call to rise. A time was near. The moon hung low and immense over the black ocean, casting silver light on the jagged cliffs of the coast. Waves crashed below like a heartbeat, steady, ancient, and unconcerned with the lives above. Samuel stood at the edge of the cliffs, barefoot, shirtless, wings stretched wide behind him. The wind howled around him, but he barely noticed. His heart beat not with fear but with anticipation. It was time. The man he had been, the dock worker, the recluse, the lonely soul who fed stray cats and spoke to no one, was gone. In his place stood something older, something not quite human, something not quite of this earth. He had tried to deny it, to stay grounded, to ignore the visions, the voices, the memories flooding back like a river breaking a dam, but the wings refused to be hidden. They responded to his thoughts now, flexing with emotion, rippling when he felt fear or excitement. They were beautiful in a way words couldn't hold, veined like obsidian, shimmering with light that had no source, catching the moonlight and twisting it into something unearthly. He closed his eyes. That song, the call, still rang in his mind. Not music, not really, but a vibration, like the hum of a planet's rotation, like something the stars themselves might sing to one another across the void. He wasn't alone. He could feel them, others, somewhere out there, some awakening in distant places, others still buried deep in human lives they didn't yet question, a network of beings bound by memory and loss, all emerging one by one, like cicadas from underground. He inhaled deeply. The air tasted sharper, alive, the earth itself seemed to breathe beneath him, and then he leaped. For one horrible second he fell, wind screamed past him, the cliffs blurred, his stomach lurched, but then instinct took over. His wings open with a sound like thunder. A surge of force jerked his body upward. Every muscle pulled tight, every nerve ignited. He caught the wind like a hawk. Then he soared, he screamed. But it wasn't fear, it was freedom. He banked left, catching an updraft that carried him above the town. From here the streets looked like veins of amber, lit by street lamps and quiet lives. No one saw him. No one looked up. He flew higher, past the bell tower, over the old churchyard, over the roofs where laundry flapped in the breeze. The higher he climbed, the less gravity seemed to matter. He didn't flap, he glided, carried by currents he could feel in his bones. The wind spoke to him in the same language the memories had. He laughed into the sky, and then something tugged at him, not physically but mentally, a sensation like a compass turning toward true north, a presence, faint but calling. He turned toward it, somewhere beyond the sea, past the curve of the earth. Others like him were waking up. He knew it now. The fall had scattered them across the world, and they were remembering, one by one. He flew for hours, circling, dipping, testing the limits of his reborn body. Each second made him stronger, sharper. His human fatigue had vanished. Hunger was gone. Sleep meant nothing. As the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, Samuel returned to the cliffs. He landed lightly, soundlessly, like a whisper on stone. His old cottage stood behind him, small, dark, irrelevant now. And in the alley beside it, the cats stirred. One of them, gray, long-limbed, stood on its hind legs for just a moment too long, staring up at him with golden eyes. Samuel felt something behind its gaze. Its nose. He watched as it slinked into the shadows, and in the moonlight he saw something. Under its fur shift, something small and black and winged, pushing against the skin. His kind weren't the only ones changing. The world was stirring. The old world, the one Earth had forgotten, the one buried beneath myths and symbols, waiting to be reborn. Samuel looked up at the sky one last time. Soon, he whispered. With one final beat of his wings, he vanished into the lightning sky. And so it began.